Greetings, Twitter. I wanted to go live for a little bit this afternoon. Wanted to talk about something a little bit different than what I had been talking about previously. I've been talking or sharing a little bit more about the abortion medicine issue that right now is standing before the Supreme Court. And once we hear from them as far as the appeals are concerned, I may touch upon that topic at a later time. What I do want to address today is the madness that is in Florida. I call it the Disney debacle, Disney DeSantis debacle. But I want to address something in particular about it that I've been following in the news since yesterday, after the announcement that Governor DeSantis made, and doing a little bit of my own research with it. And I find out that it's rather, I want to say rather interesting in a sense. And I think that y'all might find it interesting too. Governor DeSantis mentioned a statute yesterday in his statement where he's talking about that the legislature has the ability to nullify the agreement that was between ReedyCreek and Disney. I want to say technically he does and he doesn't. Now I'll explain that here momentarily. There in fact does exist a statute, and I want to look at the statute, and I want to look also at something else that was brought to my attention on Twitter, and I was not aware of it until yesterday when I was told about it. I found something interesting going through this that I think would bear me talking about it briefly. Okay, let's see here. The facts that we need to note first off is, as I said, Governor DeSantis mentioned a statute. The statute he mentioned was Chapter 63, Section 3241. This does exist it was a bill that was, statutes that was passed, originated in the Florida Senate, and it does allow the legislature to do what DeSantis is talking about, which is nullifying the development agreements. This interestingly was, the statute interestingly was passed in 2022. Now, and what makes it, I guess you could say, suspect is that this was passed last year. I mean, was this passed? How can I say? Was this the intention of this passing? Was it to as in regards to the Disney situation or not? I don't know. I've been trying to figure out when or more or less it was passed. I haven't had a chance to really get into it, other than I know that it was passed in 2022. Okay, so it's fairly recent. That's the important thing. It's fairly recent. Also, there is a constitutional amendment or a constitutional written law, basically written in the Florida Constitution, that's under Article 1, Section 10, that basically prohibits Florida legislature or Congress from passing these types of laws to impair contract. And we're going to look at both of these right now momentarily, okay, to see exactly what they say. The Florida statute of 163.3241 is basically talks about modification, and I'm reading this off my desktop screen here, so you can follow along on here. It says modification and revocation of a development agreement to comply with subsequently enacted state and federal law. If a state or federal laws are enacted after the execution of a development agreement which are applicable to and preclude a party's compliance with the terms of a development agreement, such agreement shall be modified or revoked as is necessary to comply with the relevant state or federal laws. Okay? The wording, if you look at it, it's hard not to say that it's tailored to the Disney situation. This makes me wonder if this was passed with the intent of thwarting Disney in this type of scenario. I don't know. Um, it's so recent. I mean I can't say for certain because I have not been able to find out any more information. And when I do, I will of course post it accordingly or come back and talk about it. Now, Section 10 of Article 1, and I put it here on the same window here. It says prohibited laws. No bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts shall be passed. What is this constitutional law or basically saying? It's saying that Congress cannot pass a law that will impair a contract in any way, shape, or form. What is an agreement? A development agreement is basically a contract. In this case, it's a contract between ReedyCreek and Disney. So it is a contract. Okay, so this is what makes this more interesting is that we're dealing with a contract between Disney and ReedyCreek. Okay, and as such, the one thing that we need to be very aware of is there is a conflict between these two points of regulation. Okay, and this is an issue that we have to note. Statute 3241. If we look at the Constitution and we look at the statute in chronological order, I I believe that statute 3241 should have never been passed. Why? Why? Because Section 10 of Article 1 prohibits that type of a law from being passed by the Congress. So it's very important to note that. Okay? Now, as long as Disney did everything correctly under the law that they said that they did, which was posting the notices and doing whatever they needed to do, having the two special meetings that they had and whatnot. If everything that they did was correct and followed under the law, then this current agreement between them and what was known as ReedyCreek should stand firm. It should not be questioned. It should not be, there should not be. In a court of law, it should be the ruling would be awarded to Disney in all stance because everything was done correctly and legally. That's the only way that they're going to be able, that this new board is going to be able to overturn this. Okay, there's no other way. All right. Other issues that we need to note is that according to the state constitution, and this gets we're going back to Article 1, Section, and this statute should be invalid. So if it is in fact invalid, and this would probably be determined in the court of law, any laws passed under it would be automatically invalid by default. Okay, it's very important to know that, and I'll explain why. If the Florida legislature does pass this law to nullify the agreement, it's going to be automatic that Disney is going to have to sue because they're going to have the right to do it. Number one, number two, all these conflicts or issues that I'm pointing out are substantial to a case where Disney would probably be victorious. Okay, they have to sue, and they would have to sue to determine number one. If they're going to sue, they would probably have to sue to say, okay, we're suing because Statute 3241 is invalid under Article 1, Section 10. Number one. Number two, given all the wording, everything that has been said by DeSantis, the manner in which he said it and his approach as being retaliatory, all that is going to go pointing against Governor DeSantis in the end in a lawsuit. So it's important to note all that as well. Okay, Disney, if they were to sue, will have two options basically. As far as lawsuits, they can either sue in federal court or they can sue in state court. And I think it is to Disney's favor to file federally, because they would be able to file a First Amendment lawsuit, and in that same pretense, they can file sue or file and sue for the fact that DeSantis has violated, or the Florida legislature has violated the state constitution. And at the same time, it's, I mean, I've heard on the web, on social media, that it's possible that this is also a Fifth Amendment and 14th Amendment violation in the federal constitution. And if that's the case, that would serve to strengthen the case for Disney in a federal court, and that means that the federal lawsuit would be more favorable to Disney in the end, should they decide to sue. Okay, so now it's going to be very interesting to see how this all turns out, because Governor DeSantis is going to have an uphill battle legally, should it go to court, to go to a lawsuit in court, because he's got to prove that, in fact, the statute is valid, the statute 3241. And if he can't prove it, then whatever he does under that statute is automatically invalid. It's automatically blocked. I don't see how, and like I said, I'm not no legal expert. I mean, I'd have to go and look further into Florida's constitution and these statutes, that laws that Florida has. But from what I've seen so far, I don't see how DeSantis or the Florida legislature is going to be able to prove that this statute is legal under um, an attack of the Florida Constitution, because technically the state constitution takes precedent over other statutes and laws passed by Congress. The only way, and I believe Florida is kind of the same thing as my state of Texas, and that is that to amend the Constitution, their Florida legislature would have to pass a referendum, basically sending the issue to a vote to the people in a referendum on a ballot, and the people, Florida citizens, would have to vote on it to amend the Constitution and say, okay, this statute is applicable, and this statute does not fall under Article 1, Section 10, basically. And I mean that's the only way they're going to be able to do it. So until that is done, it stands to reason legally that whatever the Constitution says has precedence over any statutes or laws that the Florida Congress would have passed. In this case, 3241 would more than likely end up being declared invalid and struck down. That's the way I see it. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, DeSantis thinks that he's got it made, that he's going to get it nullified, and that he's going to take over. Not so much. Now, here's another issue, and I haven't researched this just yet, but I've been hearing on social media that the fact that if he tries to take over Disney properties, he's violating the U.S. Constitution, because it says you cannot take control of personal property or private property. Now, the question here is, would Disney's property itself be defined as a private property because it's a company property, and we're not talking about an individual's rights to property, we're talking about a corporation. I've also heard that Fifth Amendment versus 14th Amendment, I believe the Fifth Amendment deals more with the personal individual rights, whereas the 14th Amendment restricts the states in certain areas. And I think this is where they're coming out with this logic in that respect. I'd have to go and read the two amendments myself to get an idea of what's going on, which I've not had a chance to do. But that's certainly another avenue that is worth looking into in this case, because that's going to determine that would determine whether or not Disney has a much more favorable case federally than they would state. And the reason I weigh heavily more on federal is because everybody knows, and it's been said on social media, on Twitter, on the social medias, that the majority, if not all, of the judges in the Florida Supreme Court have been appointed by DeSantis. So, they're saying, okay, these judges are going to favor the governor because he appointed them. If that were the case, then Disney would probably, in state court, would probably not have much of a chance to win. But in the federal court, which is a court that DeSantis has no control over, it would stand to favor Disney. And I think, given the nature of the lawsuits at hand, First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment, and they would have a better chance of presenting and winning their case against the state of Florida. They could probably also in federal court say, okay, we're suing because this statute is invalid under Florida's state constitution. Whether or not a federal judge can issue a ruling on that, I don't know. I think it's possible. I may be wrong. We'll have to wait and see. But I thought I'd just share this because I thought it was interesting, and I thought watching how this whole debacle's occurring. You look at it, you want to laugh in a way because you're like, okay, seriously, you think he's going to get away with it? And then when you read these statutes and you look at everything, you're like, seriously, really, you think he's going to get away with it? It's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for the state of Florida to prevail in this scenario. And I would be surprised if they did to a certain extent. All righty, well, I'll see you later. I might come back live this evening. I might not. We'll see. It just depends what time I get to my home studio and whether I can have the time to do what I need to do to get ready. If not, we'll come back again live sometime this week and chat a little bit more. Maybe by then we'll have something up on the Supreme Court and the abortion bill, which is what I'm waiting to see if there's a response, because that's why I haven't really come back to the topic at hand. But if they do issue a decision, obviously we'll talk about it on here on Twitter as soon as it comes out. Thank you. Good day.